Hello, my name is Kimberly Saelee, and welcome to our workshop on advocating for mental health literacy in the Asian Pacific Islander communities.
This is my mother's song. It's a song about leaving behind family and home. When she was young, she was known for her singing, and people would come from all over to hear her songs. Within her voice, you don't have to understand the words to feel her pain and sadness. She still remembers the innocence of her childhood and not knowing what was going on in the world around her. However, the innocence was taken away. One day as she was coming home from the farm with some aunties in the village, a plane flew above them. Before she knew it, all she heard were the sounds of cracking and explosion from the shooting. My mother hid under a house, and when the sounds dissipated, she came out to find bodies on the ground. As a child, she was so afraid. She ran and she ran. These are the images burned in her memories. And although the tragedy doesn't end there, the family eventually left behind brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles, left behind their home the sights and sounds that they were used to hearing, and made it to America. And in America, my mom still dreams of the soldiers chasing her and shooting her. At times, she dreams she's able to chop them up into many pieces, but they still come back and merge into one invincible metal soldier, and she can never win. Not knowing how to deal with the trauma and dealing with the stress of a new world, she slowly forgot the words to the songs that she was so well known for. And this is one of many stories that continue to inspire us in advocating for mental health literacy for the API community.
Thank you for coming to our talk. My name is Ya-Shu Liang. I'm an associate professor of clinical psychology at the California School of Professional Psychology at Alliant International University, Fresno. I also lead the San Joaquin Valley API Mental Health Project. Before we begin to define mental health literacy, let's think about what comes to your mind when I say literacy. When it comes to literacy, I think of one's ability to read and write. How about information technology literacy? I think of information technology literacy as knowing enough about how to utilize technology to process information in our digital era. Very similarly, we define health literacy as first, knowing some important symptoms related to certain illness, such as symptoms that lead to a heart attack. Second, knowing how to apply some basic strategy to deal with immediate health-related needs or maintain good health, such as using pressure to stop bleeding and getting adequate vitamin C through exposure to the sun. And third, knowing when and how and where to seek help, such as, do I need to go to the nearest hospital or waiting until the next appointment? What kind of doctors should I talk to? Or where can I get the help? Very similarly, mental health literacy have such components. First, the ability to understand mental health information. Second, the ability to examine help-seeking beliefs. The third, the ability to be able to apply self-help strategies. Number 4, the ability to navigate resources. More specifically, the definition of mental health literacy is the degree to which individuals are able to obtain and understand basic mental health information, such as symptoms related to depression, causes, risk factor, available treatment for anxiety, PTSD. Second, the ability to examine their own health-seeking knowledge, beliefs, attitudes. Many people believe that seeking help is a sign of weakness. Some people believe that mental health symptoms cannot be treated. Number 3, the ability to apply basic strategies to self or others to maintain or improve mental health, such as mental health hygiene, also like psychological first aid. Number 4, the ability to navigate important resources available to them, such as, should I see a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a therapist? Do I know the resources in my community? Do I know where to locate linguistically and culturally appropriate services for myself or my loved ones? So what does an adequate level of mental health literacy look like on an individual level? Adequate mental health literacy may include being able to recognize mental health related symptoms, understand that seeking help is not a sign of weakness, applying basic self-care strategies, and know where to find an appropriate level of care for themselves or others. Often, it takes a public health approach to improve mental health literacy. The goal of a mental health literacy is to elevate entire communities through education, prevention, and early intervention. More specifically, to achieve optimal results, mental health literacy intervention needs to be context-specific, developmentally appropriate, and culturally congruent. In this talk, we will be providing specific mental health literacy strategies that can be used for the Asian American and Pacific Islander population based on the 4 components we just presented.
So the first component is understanding mental health information, and this component refers to the approach utilized to recognize specific disorders or different types of psychological distress. To grasp this component, we have to understand that many individuals in the general public can't correctly recognize or identify mental health disorders, and these individuals may not understand the meaning of the terminology, the mental health terminology utilized. So then, how do we provide information regarding causes, risk factors, symptoms, and treatment to the general public? Well, a common approach is to provide information that is already available, what is already out there. And here on the slides, we have some infographics which were pulled from the internet, and anyone can easily access this. And these infographics provide information on the general causes of depression and PTSD. So for depression, there are many ways listed here that an individual can identify if they or someone else is experiencing depression. From this infographic, they can learn that a cause could be low self-esteem, even genetics, or stressful life events. As for PTSD, they can learn that it can be caused by traumatic experiences such as war experiences, abuse, and although we can use these infographics, another approach could be doing a quick Google search, as we all know, using Dr. Google, or even if an individual finds a DSM and goes through it. So even though we can access this information, patients can access this information, and they may not understand or know that these symptoms that are expressed by themselves or someone else could be different or look different according to one's culture. And so we have to take this into account. So these are the type of information that is provided for the general public to help them understand mental health information. And as you can see, it's visually pleasing and easy to read and easy to follow. However, we know that what is available out there is not always culturally appropriate. When considering the mental health literacy of our API community, we must ask, what is missing? What is missing when it comes to addressing and understanding mental health in culturally appropriate ways? How do we explain these mental health constructs in a way that makes sense to our API communities? And how can we help them increase their mental health literacy by understanding these constructs? There are a few things to consider when we attempt to do this, such as acculturation, somatization, and the API's understanding of treatment. For acculturation, it might be helpful for the API patient to understand their own experience and how it plays a role as a risk factor for mental illness. So those experiences that can be risk factors in the community are often biopsychosocial spiritual. In terms of the social, there are experiences of traumas related to war, related to resettling in a foreign country, intergenerational traumas that are passed down through the generations, even experiences of grief and loss, social adversity of losing their social networks, and struggling to keep traditional values and beliefs alive. Even family stress, communicating within the different generations, marital discord, divorce, domestic violence, and even child abuse. In terms of the spiritual component, spiritual causes of mental illness in the API community include one having an imbalance or supernatural intervention that may present like delusions or hallucinations and other mental health symptoms. So for example, emotional problems are frequently explained in traditional Chinese medicine as caused by a weak kidney or heart, whereas the Hmong conceptualizes mental health illnesses as a lack of familial role fulfillment or social support instead of psychiatric symptoms. And to note, something like suicidal ideation, we see this as a mental health concern. However, for someone like a Hmong patient who presents with present suicidal ideation, this can be more culturally appropriate because in the Hmong community, having the desire to end one's life, wishing to die, can be a way of expressing frustration with life. For somatization, there are differences within the generations and how the generations acculturate, which then influences how mental illnesses is expressed in these groups. So as a result of this, we may see the manifestation of symptoms vary among the first generation immigrant and refugee populations and their descendants. So for the first generation API refugees and immigrants, we often see somatization such as numbness, weakness, and trouble breathing when discussing mental health symptoms. Whereas for the younger generation, Asian Pacific Islanders, they may experience symptoms that include isolation, substance abuse, emotional frustration, and outbursts, behavioral issues, which to their parents may seem rebellious, and where really they are experiencing mental health and mental illness symptoms. And we also must be aware that in most API communities, there's no term for mental health phenomenons, mainly because the concept does not exist within the community. So as a result, what is then utilized to explain the concern, the mental health concern, are somatic ailments. So for example, In Mian, one may say their heart is stressed, and when translated to English, it means a burdened heart. In understanding treatment, when discussing how API patients understand mental health, we have to consider how our API patients understand treatment. So we must then explain ethics and discuss things such as, um, helping them understand that a mental health provider cannot break confidentiality, or explain what the limits to confidentiality are. And this is essential for the API clients who are afraid of having others know about their mental illness. And it's also important to know that if one mental health provider does not work out, going to see another provider is okay. And we see that APIs usually go to their medical doctor to have them tell them, the professional tell them what is wrong with them physically. And so we have to explain, going to see a mental health provider is different. The process is different, where the professional is not going to tell the client what to do or what is wrong with them, and rather it is a collaborative process. So the second component is examining help-seeking beliefs, and it focuses on answering what influences an individual's perception of seeking mental health help. In many communities, we know that there's a stigma associated with mental health, and it's not just exclusive to the API community. However, within the API community, in addition to stigma, there are barriers against seeking mental health, and these barriers may include shame, faith loss, lack of same language providers, and so on. And we might often hear these type of statements from API patients. Seeking help is a sign of weakness. Therapy is for crazy people. Mental health symptoms can't be treated. So for some as well, mental health treatment and services are viewed as a luxury, and so many API individuals may not seek treatment. For others, within the API community, it is expected for the mental health provider to fix their problems in one visit. So knowing that these are the help-seeking beliefs, knowledge, and attitudes, it leads us to ask, how do these beliefs affect the individual? What did the research say about this? It said that there is more stigma regarding medication and psychological treatment. There's more negative beliefs about medication when compared to psychological treatment. There's also the fear of it having a negative impact on employment. So the thought that seeking treatment for something like depression could negatively impact their work. Although we know this is not the case. In fact, seeking treatment for a condition like depression is more likely to improve one's overall well-being and positively impact their employment. And as well as stigma, individuals were not willing to share their symptoms with family and friends, and not even a medical provider. So are they more willing to then seek mental health professionals for help? And the research also says that when an individual gains greater understanding of mental health terms, the idea of seeking mental health treatment becomes more favorable. So one answer to the type of mental health strategies often being practiced is not a surprise to many. We must help normalize these help-seeking behaviors. However, with the API community, the trick is to normalize the context of the individual's culture while utilizing the resources already available. So we have to shed light to the types of symptoms they are experiencing and to shed light to their help-seeking behaviors. So Every Mind Matters is an app that I believe is being used in the UK, and it helps normalize mental illnesses for
Everyone knows
those
that
who are using
feeling.
it. And we
When
believe
life
an
gets
app
on
can
top
be
of
less
us.
intimidating, and one can assume it helps someone be stopped through an app,
We feel
and other
stressed,
people are dealing with the same issues as well.
low, anxious, or have trouble sleeping. We think there's nothing to be done, nothing we can do about it.
But now, there's a new way to help turn things around. Every Mind Matters will show you simple ways to look after your mental health.
It'll get you started with a free online plan designed to help you deal with stress, boost your mood, improve your sleep, and feel more in control.
We can all benefit from taking simple steps to look after our mental health.
Every mind matters.
We're in this together.
Come on.
And so another way to normalize is through social media. And if you're on social media, you have seen that many individuals have become more transparent about their mental health experiences. And because of this, many celebrities have then spoken out about their mental health concerns, experiences, as well as seeking help. And so this reinforces representation and modeling. When we think about representation, we often think about how the providers or staff must be of API heritage to help the API patient. However, that is only one of many ways we can increase the API community's help-seeking beliefs, attitudes, knowledge, and behaviors. So one way is to show them something like this, to help normalize that other API are seeking help. One way we can normalize mental health information for the API community is to consider what is not often explicitly addressed in the API communities. So what is not often explicitly addressed? And this can be shame, pride, face loss, collectivistic orientation, model minority myth, identities, spiritual beliefs, and so much more. It's often within the API communities that these are not addressed, not discussed. And it's not common to address these within the API community. However, we can help normalize these experiences with our API patients to help them understand their own help-seeking beliefs. So earlier I showed a few infographics on depression and PTSD. We can take that same approach to address the barriers against mental health within the API communities. Essentially, what is not explicitly addressed? And one way is to discuss that through an infographic. This one here focuses on breaking the model minority myth. This one here is developed with the Southeast Asian community in mind to provide information, again, for the model minority myth. The previous one was on the Pacific Islander community. And both infographics focus on what is unique to approach with these specific API subgroups. What do we need to discuss exclusively in regards to these subgroups? Because even within these subgroups, there are differences that we need to take into account as well.
Self-help strategies are actions that a person can take to deal with a mental disorder. There are basic strategies to maintain or improve mental health. For mild depression, examples of self-help strategies may include social support, physical exercise, self-help books, St. John's worts, vitamins, special diets, doing courses on relaxation, stress management, or yoga. In addition, we find on social media various techniques to help with stress that are more mainstream. For example, with the information on the left, when at school, children can talk to teacher, breathe, or take a walk when feeling upset or unfocused. These are all great examples, but what are some things that Asian children might do that is different? The information on the right gives examples of what not to say to a friend experiencing mental health problems, such as, "It's all in your head," or "You need to get out more." Are there other suggestions that might be different to the API community? Another line of defense is mental health first aid. When you think about first aid, you think about the first immediate assistance to take care of injuries, to preserve life, to stop conditions from worsening, and to promote recovery. Similarly, mental health first aid is assistance to take care of mental health. And you do this by initiating the conversation with the person to help facilitate recognition of the mental health disorder, encourage them to seek professional help, provide ongoing support, and encourage other forms of support, such as self-help strategies, assess their risk for harm, and help them navigate appropriate resources available to them. For example, whether to see a psychologist or psychiatrist, and assess for their access to community resources or culturally appropriate services. One of the components was to support the use of self-help strategies. There are many useful self-help strategies out there, but the unique ways in which the API community participate in self-help depends on different factors. In a collectivistic culture, self-help is done through social support networks, familial ties, indigenous healers, religious and spiritual outlets. In Chinese culture, acupuncture, massage, herbal remedies, dietary therapy, and Tai Chi are all useful for treating depression and anxiety. Coping patterns seen in American Indians include resilience, restraint, religious coping, creative diversion, and recreation. In some Asian cultures, the elderly would rely on self-care first and then seek help from their spouses, friends, neighbors, and adult children. For Korean elderly immigrant, the number of good friends predicted better mental health. Shame and face loss is a barrier to mental health literacy, and for the API community, it is tied to how one's actions can negatively impact others, leading to judgment and shame. Individuals begin to think about how others will perceive them, how their family will think, and how they will let others down. Here, we look at one way to transform shame, and it's through the lens of self-compassion. You can understand the nature of shame as your brain's response to a threat of disconnection. You learn to label the shame for what it is, an emotion, putting distance between yourself and the emotion. Replace judgment with curiosity to facilitate a more caring stance towards yourself. Acknowledge that sometimes we are our own worst inner critic, and practice what is helpful to you instead of worsening your state of being. Spiritual belief is an important self-help strategy for the API community. Spirituality gives a sense of purpose, connectedness, a belief in a higher being, and a sense that there's more to life than material or practical. These are activities that give meaning and value to people's lives. Spiritual belief impacts one's locus of control, such as a belief in destiny or karma, which allows a person to reframe or reinterpret events that are seen as uncontrollable, making them less stressful or at times more meaningful. Meditation and yoga serves individuals by affecting neural pathways that connect to the endocrine and immune systems, affecting physiological mechanisms. Environments promoting spiritual connectedness, such as spiritual buildings, nature, art, and music, may all impact mental health. Spiritual and religious support systems enable people to cope with stress and negative life events. And spiritual belief is a coping style, allowing a person to collaborate with their belief system when a problem arises. And solution is perceived by the individual as a shared process. So in navigating resources, some questions to consider are: who do API traditionally go for help? How do API navigate appropriate resources? And what resources are available? In a survey exploring mental health literacy among Hmong community members, it was found that more than half do not know where to go to receive mental health services. 65% did not know how to get the number of a suicide prevention hotline. More than half do not know where to get useful information about mental illness, and more than half do not know how to contact a mental health clinic in their area. API navigate resources through formal and informal pathways. The formal pathways include going to professionals, and the informal pathway can mean going to elders for help. Usually family is first, then the community, and as the last resort, they will go to medical professionals. Family includes clan leaders, family heads, grandparents, aunts, and uncles. Community includes healers, shaman, monks, clergy, and professionals would include medical and psychological professionals. When regarding formal and informal pathways, API navigate resources we have to determine whether it is motivated by stigma of mental health or can be a culturally problem-solving approach. Due to this, we have to engage in cultural modifications and incorporate specific adaptive strategies appropriate to the API client's culture, spirituality, and other factors. Here are a few national statewide resources. These are what are currently out there. Local resources can vary, all fluctuate based on funding and availability. What are some local API resources in your area? Recommendations on mental health literacy interventions in API communities mean taking into account all 4 mental health literacy components. Make sure your mental health literacy intervention is context-specific, developmentally appropriate, and culturally congruent. Consider generation, such as immigrant or second generation, and level of acculturation. Consider API values and belief. For some, self-help may sound selfish. Utilize symbols that API communities are familiar with, and use plain language, not jargon.
And thank you. That is it for our presentation. If you have any questions, you can contact me here at my email. And if you want to learn more about our advocacy work, please visit our website. And if needed, please cite this presentation as the following.